So there's a different title in the program, and I just want to say it is not the AI that needs to be responsible, right? That's my main core theme. We are the responsible agents. Artificial intelligence is a bunch of software engineering techniques by which we make ourselves more intelligent through our machines, okay? So there was a recent some frou-frou about the people who do AI ethics not knowing anything about AI. I do know something about AI. I have some degrees in it. And when I was doing it, I was on this robot, and this is obviously 90s technology. It was called Cog. I have to say, Cog didn't work at all. This is what photographers do when they get humanoid robots. They want to make them pose like they're thinking, right? People really, really want to make AI that they can be friends with. I was just debating this with some guy on the impact stage, right? They want AI they can be friends with, fall in love with, will their fortunes to, maybe their power, maybe they want to be president not only for life but forever, right? But equals over which they have complete dominion. They want to buy and sell citizens, right? Arguably, this is both sick and dangerous. And I say that as someone whose PhD was supposed to be turning this thing into a 3-year-old. So we all make this mistake. We all see the appeal, right? But I found it really weird while I was working on that robot that didn't work at all. It turned out it wasn't properly earthed. I was at MIT, and it took them 18 months to earth the brain. But even while it wasn't working, while it was basically just a statue, people were saying, oh, it would be unethical to unplug that. And I'd be like, well, it's not plugged in. And then they say, well, if you plug it in, it'd be unethical to unplug it. And I'm like, well, it doesn't work. And then they would get really confused. Meanwhile, there are these robots that worked. This thing really did work. Believe it or not, it was incredibly complicated, that were shaped like insects. Nobody cared about those, except for this guy. He's a high school student, so that's why. If you can't tell, that's actually me. If you're young, be afraid if you change. Anyway, so this was my PhD supervisor at the time that was saying that he went to a meeting, like something like this, there was a big panel, and everybody else on the panel called him conservative for saying robots might not take over the world. Okay, what could possibly be going on with this? Fortunately, I knew a philosopher, only one. And one of my very first papers, actually, we wrote it in 1996. It took us a while to get it out. We didn't do very well where we put it. And then it got re-put into the main AI conference in 2011. But I want to show you some text that I had from that originally 1998 version of the paper. We believe the exaggerated fears of and hopes for AI are symptomatic of a larger problem, a general confusion about the nature of humanity and the role of ethics in society. Our thesis is that these exaggerated fears are false concerns which can distract us from the very real dangers of artificial intelligence technologies. The real dangers are no different than those for other artifacts. The potential for misuse, either through carelessness or malevolence, by the people who control them. And have a look at the malicious uses of AI document that came out this year. It's amazing. I think it's really important that this paper was literally called Just Another Artifact. And I was just in a panel this morning that even though I wrote that paper twice, I was still astounded and impressed by other people making the point that we don't need separate regulation for AI. And we don't want to sit there and argue, is this AI or is this not AI? We want to make sure that we enforce current standards of accountability and stop thinking that AI is this magic thing that somehow would block the accountability for a company for its software. All right? So speaking of things that go wrong, this is a paper we had come out last year in 2017 in Science. If you haven't heard about it, the headlines that came out of this was AI is racist and sexist. And then the good headline said, and it's our fault, right? And because this was just trained on the English language internet. Steve Colbert made fun of that, saying, the scientists are stupid. Why would you train things on the internet, right? But this was just standard text by ordinary people. And we replicated something called the implicit bias, which is recorded by something called the implicit association test. So for example, all you're doing is you're telling someone you have two different possible tasks. One is every time you see a girl's name or, and a family word, or a boy's name and a career word, you push the arrow, you're watching for these, and you're pushing the keys on the computer. And then you see how fast you can do that, and then you see how fast you can do women's names with career words and men's names with family words. And if the world were a fair place, those two tasks would be equally hard. But in fact, it's way harder to do male names and family and female names and career than the other way around. And so this was something that was published by psychologists, had been out for decades. It was controversial because people didn't want to believe this about themselves. We not only replicated it with a completely different way, we looked at the word embeddings, and I'm sorry I don't have time to explain word embeddings. Ask me later or just Google it. but it's just counting words. You're just saying how many words. I want to understand what the word, I don't know, where's the sentence here? I want to know what the word human is. Well, how often does trained occur near human, and how, just counting how many times every other word occurs around the word you want to understand. It just makes a vector. It's just a count. And yet, it replicates the biases, and not only biases, visceral things. Like it could tell you that you that you find flowers more pleasant and insects less pleasant. So visceral information about the world just by counting the way we use words in our data, right? Well, the other scary thing, though, was that, for my co-author, Arvind Narayanan, he was up for tenure this year. So the whole thing was scary because he thought it was a cool project, but we were all freaked out by how strong the results were. So he said, I want to see this against something I know is true. So he made Eileen Kaliskan, who did all the work, go out and check. This is the y-axis here is the same evil bias thing that replicated this terrible prejudice here. So it's saying how male or female it thinks words are. The words are the different jobs in the US labor statistics. Now, some of those jobs have more than one word, and word embeddings only work for one word. So that's why there's some of the noise here. It's just where it was hard to get the two words down to one. But anyway, this is a 90% correlation. Sorry that number's not big. Oh, there it is. It is bigger. Duh. Okay, I know my slides. Anyway, the point is that 90% correlation between these prejudice, the same things that are giving us the implicit bias, and actual facts about who's programming. Unfortunately, hardly any women are programming anymore, which mortified me. When I was a programmer in the 80s, there were a lot more women programmers. And then this is like nurses and things like that. So our implicit biases are reflecting stuff going on in the real world, at least some of them, right? Something is happening. Oh, I forgot I'm holding this. I thought my laptop was over there. Right. So this sort of, part of the reason this got into science wasn't just about AI. It was there under cognitive science. Bias, if you're in machine learning, bias is just regularities that you can detect in data. It's actually what you want. It means that you've learned something. Bias isn't a bad word in machine learning. Stereotype, and now actually let me skip ahead. Prejudice is the bad thing. Prejudice is doing bad things to bad people, right? But the interesting thing that result implies is that stereotypes, which are the mental attitudes that lead to prejudicial actions, are actually, they're just ordinary biases, but ones that society has agreed we don't want to persist anymore, okay? And that implies that there's nothing that we can do just with machine learning, not with that stupid kind of machine learning I just told you with the vectors, to overcome stereotype. We'd have to actually know about the human society and the negotiated things that we've come up with where we say we want women to be able to have jobs, right? So to give you a clear example of this, so bias here is knowing everything that a programmer means, including that right now most of them are male, right? That's not in the dictionary definition, but you can find it in how words are used and if you just watch TV, right? Okay, stereotypes are just that part that we don't agree with anymore. Right? We don't want all the programmers to be male. And then prejudice is if you actually acted on the stereotype. You said, oh, she can't be a programmer. Okay? I hope that's clear. So everybody got very excited about this, and they added it to their list of things. So there already had been a bunch of people talking about, I'll just add it to the list of things there. This is just, society is biased, so if we use machine learning just from ordinary culture, we'll wind up with the same biases. There's other things that are introduced by ignorance, right? So society doesn't call black people gorillas that often, maybe occasionally, unfortunately. But anyway, but there can be that you just didn't have enough pictures of people that were different from yourself. Or have you seen the soap dispenser thing that people have to put toilet paper on their hands just to get soap out? So that means like there was nobody engineering that soap dispenser that wasn't completely like brightly colored. So and this is the one that was in the New York Times before our paper came out. But let's not forget, AI, the A stands for artifact. And the thing that I really worry about is the deliberate introduction. Because when we catch these problems, we can fix them. That's actually one of the cool things about AI, is we can go, okay, we want to try to get on top of that. But if somebody's deliberately putting something in there, and then they obfuscate it, they say, oh, my machine is conscious, or you can't possibly touch the magic, deep learning is not magic. And we don't need to know what every weight in deep learning is to hold a system accountable. When we audit a bank, we don't go and check the synapses of the accountants in the bank. We look at the accounts, right? So this is not, I'm not saying we can't use AI, I'm just saying that we need to realize that people are accountable. Oh yeah, so this is almost exactly what we said 20 years ago. It was 100 years of women's suffrage yesterday, and a fifth of that ago when I wrote this paper. Now that's scary too. Anyway, so how do we deal with these things? With automatic things, as I mentioned, we can talk about compensating with architecture, so you can learn about like, oh, don't express the swear words, don't express your prejudices. For the ignorant stuff, diversify your workforce, of course, but the main thing is that you do iterative agile, which actually, you won't believe this, the MP in charge of data technology was doing a really great pitch for agile development today, which I love. And then the deliberate, we have to be able to audit, and we have to have regulation. And I was, again, just arguing about this on the impact stage. Look, ICT systems are designed as architecture. And if you look at architecture, architects learn laws, policy, and how to work with governments and legislatures when they're undergraduates, all right? And I would expect that if people are held to account for the things that have gone wrong, for example, with Cambridge Analytica, our undergraduates should be demanding to have that kind of education in their undergraduate curriculum so they can defend themselves and prove that they've done things like due diligence, right? But how did this come to be? It used to be you could build anything anywhere, but then society decided that buildings falling on people was not okay. All right? And they noticed that where you put buildings and bridges and stuff affected everybody. So we had to negotiate that. How do we negotiate? We use government as a way to negotiate with each other, to help us build up and maintain our public goods. So ICT systems are now falling on people and affecting everyone. So I just think we're maturing. And we need to bring this stuff in. That, I never learned this as an undergraduate either. I'd spent a lot of time trying to figure this out. I think it's not just about at what rate can you get the code to market as fast as possible. It's about having successful and sustainable innovation, so your company is sticking around. How am I doing for time people? There's no time people. I can go on forever. Okay. So, one of the things that we're having right now is massive inequality, and people draw this line. They say, oh, 1978, like what happened? There was this great decoupling or something. No, look, there was some really interesting period where we were working really hard. Oh, I didn't tell you what this is. Okay, this is let's see, I can't even remember. This is the percentage of money held by the people making the top 1% of income in the United States since when they put income tax in and they had to record it. And this is political polarization measured by whether or not political parties could cooperate. And they kind of want to cooperate, so as long as the voters allow them to, they will. All right, so in the US and the UK both, we kind of got our act together after just one world war and the crash, the financial crash. And then everybody said, okay, this is too much mayhem. We need to get together. And we started doing things like social welfare and redistribution until 1978, when for some reason Thatcher and Reagan thought that that wasn't so important, okay? So, but late 19th century inequality was probably also driven up by distance reducing technologies, because you just it's not by being evil, it's just that if you're really good and you have a larger customer base, you can outcompete more people and inequality goes up. The top 1% have more, right? And then something happened, it wasn't a great uncoupling. Some people made some policy decisions that helped spread money around, right? One of the things may have been the blocked wealth extraction from countries. And what are the countries that have the most wealth extracted from them right now? Russia, Afghanistan, Greece. I mean, this is a problem. The elite, as well as the proletariat, realized that this was just too much mayhem. You can't even maintain your position, and so they signed up, right? Empirically, I don't think this is, I think this is wrong. I think it's supposed to be 0.27. Anyway, there's no theory behind it. But it seems that it's not that you want everybody exactly the same. You do want to reinforce people who are innovating and make sure that they can get their public goods to market. But if you have it as high as we have it now, there's not enough people to spend money, and the economy actually starts collapsing. And if you even have it in the 30s, you already have this social unhappiness that leads to things like polarization. All right, so regulating AI, just quickly, don't reward corporations by capping liabilities when they fully automate a business process. I think this is out the window now. Nobody is really talking about legal persons in AI seriously anymore. This was like a year ago. But nevertheless, I mention it just in case someone reintroduces the idea. Don't motivate obfuscation. For those of you who are programmers, that's when we make the code complicated for no reason, just so people can't read it, right? Don't motivate that by saying, oh, if your system's like conscious or something, then you'll be regulated differently. No. However you get your job done, you're still held accountable the same way. All right? Clear code is safer, and we know it's not only that it's like, other people can look at it, it's also easier for us to maintain. Developers, we want to have clean code, but it's easier and faster to get it out quick, right? And so we always have that competition. Regulation should help motivate us to do the right thing. All right? And that's why I'm saying proof of due diligence, I think, is sufficient. I don't think we need special stuff for transparency. And transparency is a trade-off. It's about abstraction. As long as we maintain the accountability that's already in the law, we should be OK. I would say, oh, yeah, Bath, we work. I don't know if PhD students have made it in yet. but yeah, we work on this, trying to help. It turns out that the same tools that help us debug real-time AI also help just ordinary people better understand the robots that are in their environment. And so we have money from AXA now to look at whether that will still work if you have an overly anthropomorphic robot. And there's going to be a panel on this afternoon. But I just want to shout out my most recently successful graduating PhD student who couldn't wait around to find out the answer and stuck a bee costume on his robot and already radically changed how people understood the robot's behavior just by slightly anthropomorphizing it. So yeah, OK. So I know, oops, sorry. I know you're thinking about, sorry about the build. What about the robots? Well, what about the cows? OK? We will never build something with chips and wires that shares our visceral experiences as much as cows do. So, I mean, a lot of people are worried about robot ethics and robot rights and things, and they're just not thinking straight. We are obliged to build AI. We are not obliged to, OK? So I'll skip over this. The British are leading. They were the first country with national level soft policy on this, but I don't have time to talk about it. And I'm going to skip over this, but it's important. I'll put it online, don't worry. The summary is the most important things are safety and security of AI, accountability, social and economic stability, human dignity and flourishing, and safety and security for AI, which includes not making unique things that aren't backed up and stuff like that. That's going to be suffered and mine being owned. Thank you.